conspiracy theories and all this. You shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be doing that. I'm like, if they steal my identity, they're going to give it back. They're going to find out I don't have any money and I don't have connections. It's not a big deal. He even used to, so for a while you could get an SD card that had a Wi-Fi ability. It's like, it was really cool if you had a game cam. So we put them in game cams and we could just access them from the house and look at all the pictures. Well, I threw one in my camera. It's like, you can't put that in your camera. I said, what, they're gonna get 400 pictures of a 4-year-old? I mean, really, it's not that big a deal. So yeah, I'm a little on the lax side. So they could probably steal my identity, but like I said, they would probably give it back. Because there's just not that, it's just not all that interesting. And you're not gonna gain anything. Which I say, that don't steal my identity. I'd rather not have a mess with that. Anyway. So when they get these, two-step authentication, I can understand it if it's like medical records or bank records, but just signing into Blackboard should not require that much security. Okay, so now that I've got off that soapbox.
They only do that for teachers.
Do they only do it for teachers?
Yeah.
And staff members. I have to do it because I work for the school.
So are you in IT or what? So you're the one I'm ranting at.
Yeah.
Okay, I will say, and I'm not saying this just because you're sitting here, anytime I've had to call IT, whoever helps me, they're always very sweet and always very, very helpful. I've never had an issue getting help from IT. I just have an issue with some of their policies. So maybe you could figure out why it doesn't let me log in every day. Because it is since about the second week of the semester. Every time I log in, it says they can't authenticate me, and it tells me to log out and log back in. And I did that once; it didn't change anything, so I just go around it. Because as long as I don't log out, it still lets me in the system. It lets me get on the computer. It doesn't let me. I can't. So like from where I'm at, I can't go into Blackboard, but I can go onto Chrome and go through Ramport, open angelo.edu and go to Ramport and go in it that way. But it won't just let me sign on the computer. But like I said, I figured a way around it, so it's not an issue. I'm good at figuring ways around things. Okay, so where we finished up with George Donner. He died. They ate a bunch of people. That is sort of an isolated incident. There are probably other documented cases of cannibalism, but none that I know about, and none of that scale. But this was not an easy task, getting across the country to Oregon or California. There were a lot of dangers, but there were also some people who were promoting it. I went one slide too far because we never finished up. We were going to talk about John Fremont, and I was actually going to play another song for you, but I forgot about it until just now. Fremont was kind of known as the Pathfinder. Is sort of he sort of built his reputation. He is an Army officer, and he was sent west by his father-in-law, Thomas Hart Benton, sorry. If you remember him, he was one of the parties of the Missouri Compromise. He's a senator. He's high up there. His daughter married an Army officer. So Daddy is helping son-in-law get some good assignments. And he arranged for, and not that Fremont was lacking, he was a second lieutenant, and the Topographical Corps, which is not an engineer, but he wasn't a cavalry officer either. You know, he wasn't a dummy, but he wasn't one of the highest ones in his class. But didn't arrange for Fremont to explore the eastern half of the Oregon Trail. While out there, he met a man named Kit Carson, which you might have heard of, might not. Kit Carson was like the explorer's explorer. He was a mountain man, he was a hunter, he was a trapper. He got along well with the Indians. He learned their language. He actually encouraged the Army officers, including Fremont and Custer and some of the others that he worked with, to deal fairly with the Indians. That didn't exactly happen. But Carson had explored thoroughly Oregon, Mexican California, up to Salt Lake, and he helped Fremont discover these trails. So Fremont is the pathfinder. And he, he did find them. He found them with help, but, and the trails were already well established. They were well established by all the mountain men who had been up there. But he put them all on paper. He mapped out the area and he wrote a glowing account of the area. And it was published in 1845, and it really helped spark this Oregon fever. You know, he really oversold the area as to what it could be. He's going to get a little crossways with the government when he gets into California, and I'm kind of jumping ahead with the California part because a lot of the turmoil in California is going to happen after the Spanish-American War, or not Spanish, I keep saying Spanish-American War, it's the war with Mexico. And Fremont is going to get involved at that point. At this point, California, so early 40s, California is in turmoil. There are a lot of U.S. settlers in the area. The Mexican settlers that are in the area are not overly loyal to Mexico. They're really kind of happy that Mexico City, which is the capital, is so far away that they really just don't pay attention to Mexico. They're just kind of doing their own thing out here in California. But there are rumors that the French and the British are interested in California. They were totally false rumors, but they were rumors nonetheless, and they spurred people to action. Jackson sent emissaries to Mexico to try to buy California. That didn't work, but of course, that makes Mexico suspicious that the U.S. wants California, which is obvious. We try to buy it. We want it. And there's some tension between the different groups. You have U.S. settlers who want California to be part of the United States. You have Mexican settlers who are loyal to Mexico and want to be part of Mexico. Then you have another group of Mexican settlers who really couldn't care less what's going on in Mexico and are just happy to be in California. And then there's some talk of maybe California should be its own country. And so there's a lot of tension there. And all of this is going on. And they add Texas to the mix. Now, Mexico initially encourages settlers from the U.S. Right after they win their independence, there are not a lot of people in Texas. The Mexican government sees Americans as a way of boosting that, maybe driving the Indians out. And they allow Texans, or allow Anglo settlers to come in. Now, Mexico has abolished slavery, so they're opposed to slavery, and on paper at least, the people coming in don't own slaves. The reality was most of them were Southerners, and they brought slaves with them. But again, they're removed from Mexico City. There's some distance there. And what's happening in Texas isn't actually what the Mexican government planned. And there were other conditions too. If you settled in Texas as an Anglo, you had to convert to Catholicism. You had to be part of the Catholic Church. You had to learn Spanish. There were several rules that you were supposed to follow. Some did, some didn't. Some married Mexican women in order to get their citizenship. But by 1835, there were about 30,000 Americans and only about 3,000 Mexicans. You know, they've got them 10 to 1. And I want to say that probably about 1,000 slaves at this point. And Santa Anna orders them out. He's like, no, you're not doing what we said. You've got to leave. Of course, Santa Anna was a dictator and not the greatest leader, but he orders the Americans out. The Americans decide they don't want to leave. That instead, they're going to make Texas its own country. So we have the War for Texas Independence. Y'all all know the basic storyline. We're not going to go into it in depth. March 6th was the Alamo. March 2nd, which is actually during the siege of the Alamo, the representatives met at Washington on the Brazos, declared their independence, ran when said just, you know, at the end of the Alamo, and Santa Anna says, okay, now we're coming for y'all. So they all scatter to the winds, but we've declared our independence. They finally beat Santa Anna on April 21st at San Jacinto. Santa Anna is defeated. Somehow, for some reason, we take his leg, his fake leg, but, you know, keeps him from running, I guess. They negotiate for freedom. Santa Anna signs up. Santa Anna goes back to Mexico City, where the Mexican government says, nope, you're not in, there's a coup, you're not in charge anymore, and no, we didn't give up Texas. But it's too late. Texas has already drafted a constitution. This constitution legalizes slavery. It bans free blacks. It makes Sam Houston president. And it sets up the offer for annexation. I mean, they're not beating around the bush. It's like, we're a new country, but hey, we want to join y'all. If the U.S. government will have us, we're voting for annexation. But of course, nobody in their right mind in the United States government was going to sign on to that. I mean, Texas is a huge area to begin with. And it's obviously a slave state, or going to be a slave state. Andrew Jackson wanted Texas, but there's no other northern state ready to come on board that you can balance it out with the way they did the Missouri Compromise. it's too hot of a topic to touch. So now the Texans are kind of stuck. They have their own country that they really didn't want to run, but they've got to. So they talk of expansion. They do. Texas does get formal recognition from both France and Britain, which is a major step. I mean, we were an actual country for a few years. And it's a growing country. By 1836, that 30,000 Americans had grown to 40,000. By 1845, there were 150,000 Texans. John Tyler promoted annexation in 1843, but he's rejected by the Senate. And it's going to take, Tyler actually can get credit for bringing in Texas, but he doesn't get it for doing it on his own. What actually helps Texas is the next presidential election in the United States. Tyler's not running. Remember, he's kind of the man without a party. He's already hacked everybody off. So in the election of 1844, do I have this up here? No, let's go to the right slide. The whole idea of adding Texas was part of everybody's platform. It's a very popular idea, but not a prudent political one. The Whigs will run Henry Clay. The Democrats are going to run Martin Van Buren. And James Polk comes in as a dark horse candidate. James Polk was a military man. He was someone nobody really knew. And he kind of gains the he cannot get words to come out of my mouth, sorry. He will benefit from people not liking Van Buren and not liking Clay. And Polk will be elected. Now, Polk also benefits from some growing influence of the slaveholding South in the Democratic Party. He is going to push. He's not going to be anti-slavery, but he's also not going to do everything he can to help the slaves or the slave holders. Now, while he's in office, he is going to work on a tariff reduction, which is one of the benefits of the South, that the South wants. He reestablishes that independent treasury that had been killed under Tyler. He will work on both the Oregon, he will settle the Oregon boundary, and California is going to come in, at least as a territory, under his administration because of the war. Texas, however, which is where we were, comes in under Tyler because Polk is elected. Tyler sees that as a mandate that the population wants Texas to be annexed. So they annex it March 1st, 1845. It's formally accepted on December 29th, 1845. The border is assumed to be the Rio Grande because that is what Texas had settled with Santa Anna. But remember, the Mexican government disavowed Santa Anna and said, no, we're not giving up Texas. And two, if we do, it's not going all the way down to the Rio Grande. So we annex Texas, and then we immediately send federal troops to the border to hang out, just in case. Because, you know, things happen, right? So while they're hanging out down here along the Rio Grande, at the other side of the top edge of the country, we're working on the Oregon border. We're tired of sharing Oregon with Britain. Not exactly sure what precipitates this, but all of a sudden, we want Oregon for ourselves. And the chant is 5440 or fight. That's the border that we agree that everybody wants, which is the upper edge of the joint territory with Great Britain. So I think on that map, it's the green outline box. What we will settle for is the 49th parallel, which is where the solid green box fits in. It's an agreement by treaty, the Buchanan-Pakenham Treaty. It's signed on June 18th, 1846. And this whole idea of 5440 or fight kind of goes out the window. Everybody is kind of okay with this. This will be good. And one of the reasons that they were okay with this is because we've already started fighting. And if we decide we're going to fight the British, then we'd be fighting the Mexicans and the British at the same time. Because down south, those soldiers that are hanging out on the border are going to get fired upon. So on March 6, 1846, Mexico breaks relationships with the U.S. because we annexed Texas. Not because we sent troops down, but because we've annexed Texas. They still felt they had a claim on Texas. Like I said, we sent troops under Zachary Taylor down to the Rio Grande. A man named John Slidell will go to Mexico City to negotiate. Negotiations fail, and he will be sent back. My notes say he gave up, but I think he was actually told to leave in March of 1836. Soon after that, Mexican troops fire on the U.S. soldiers. I can't remember how many die. I think only one. It's not a horrible battle. It's not even really a battle. But blood has been shed. And that is the claim, is blood has been shed on American soil, because we claim all the way down to the Rio Grande. And the war is declared. May 9th, Pope goes to Congress on May 13th, 1846. War is declared. It is not a totally popular war. There's a lot of opposition, particularly in the New England states. They call it Mr. Pope's War. You have people like Thoreau who refuse to pay their taxes because they don't agree with the war. Most of the opposition to the war is edged in slavery. They don't want a war to preserve a slave state. And I mean, the writing's on the wall. Mexico owns a lot of territory that looks really good to us. I mean, Texas alone is more, it's like big enough, it actually could be initially, this is no longer the case, I believe, legally, I don't think it can be. Initially, Texas could have been split up into 5 states. That's a big area. But they also own, and of course, Texas claims all this over here, which we're not going to get to keep. But that's a whole other story. But they also own all of this. This is all Mexico. And this little spot down here, how they overlook this, I don't know, but we have to come back for this part. But when we start the war, it's not just to win this. We start eyeing this immediately. In fact, we send people like Fremont and other Army and Corps of Engineer types, our engineers, our topographical people. We have a war going on, and we send explorers out to check out this new area we're going to win. We haven't won the war yet, but we're really confident. And we weren't prepared for war. Again, this whole idea of no standing army will come back to bite you in the butt whenever you need one. So we weren't prepared for battle. But we ramp up pretty quickly. This is actually going to become the training ground. I mean, you see this in hindsight. It doesn't actually, you don't really see this they don't recognize it at the time because obviously they don't know that the Civil War is going on. But this is the first war this is really the first war that the graduates of West Point are going to participate in. And this is where Lee gets his battle combat, and Jackson, and Davis, and any number of names that you're going to come back across when we get to the Civil War, if we get to the Civil War. But the Civil War will come, and these people will fight it. It is a very devastating war. The Mexican War is actually statistically our most costly war. More people will die. Okay, I have that in my notes. I'm getting ahead of myself. So neither side's prepared, but we go to war. We win. We're not going to go through all the battles, but this is where the Halls of Montezuma line in the Marine Corps hymn comes in. If any of y'all know that, the Marines will take Mexico City, so that's where you get from the Halls of Montezuma. We win the war. We will annex California. California, this is where Fremont comes back in. California has declared themselves a country, the Bear Flag Republic. They do this in 1846, and they put Fremont in charge. At the same time, in July of 46, John Sloat, who was the commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, lands in California and proclaims it part of the U.S. So we have kind of dueling people here, but it will get worked out where Fremont will get a slap on the wrist for being overly aggressive, and we just annex California. I think they were all of the country for a month, maybe 2. Zachary Taylor will make a name for himself during the battles in the northern Mexico. because we fight a little bit in Texas, but we pretty quickly get down to where we're fighting in Mexico. We're not fighting to win Mexico, but that's where the fighting is occurring. Pope does not want to create a president, so he pulls Taylor back, sends in Winfield Scott, who's much older. And Scott's the one who's actually in charge when they take Mexico City on September 13th, 1847. He is the one who was in charge when they negotiate the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which was ratified on March 10th, 1848, in which Mexico gives up all claims to Texas above the Rio Grande, gives up California and New Mexico. So all of this bluish color and all of that orangish color are now ours. And now we have the Mormons back because we annexed where the poor Mormons had gone to get away from us. But that's okay. They're fine for a while. In return, the U.S. agrees to pay $15 million and pay the claims of U.S. citizens against the Mexican government up to an amount of like $3 million. It didn't amount to much. So Mexico actually gets paid for their land, but it's still a huge, actually, technically it's a little bit bigger than Louisiana Purchase. It doesn't look like it on the map, but it is. I mean, it's a bargain. $15 million for all that land. People would pay that today. Not if you adjust for inflation, but you know, if somebody said that I could have all of that for $15 million, I'd figure out a way to get $15 million. And then I would kick all those people out because I'm mean like that. But the war left some legacies. First, like I said, it's the deadliest in terms of percentage. Out of every 1,000 men who fought, 110 died. Compare that to the Civil War, which is our next deadliest, in which for every 1,065 died. It's almost twice as bad. Not quite, but almost. It was a rough war. It was very deadly. A lot less people fought than fought in the Civil War, but your odds of dying were pretty good. It's also our first successful offensive war. This is the first time we were truly on the offense. It's the first time we take an enemy capital. It's the first time we established martial law on foreign soil, because when we took their capital, we took charge of it. And for almost a year, until the treaty was signed. Like I said, this is the first time the West Point grads really get to fight. And it's going to become a point of national pride that we could do all these things. That we're powerful enough that we can really start kind of an imperialistic, I didn't really look at it at that time, but it's kind of an imperialistic move. You know, now we're playing with the big dogs. We can do what France and Britain have been doing. We can go in and take over other areas. And even though we were already technically a transcontinental nation because of Oregon, but we shared it, this truly makes us a transcontinental nation. We now have everything between, you know, New Jersey and California. It's not, oh, we're a transcontinental nation if you go up and over. We now own it all. And there are going to be people who aren't satisfied with that. That for a lot of people, this fulfills that manifest destiny. You know, a lot of people saw manifest destiny as simply filling the continent. And there are going to be others that see our manifest destiny as coming back or maybe expanding beyond Pacific or the Atlantic. But we will talk about that. That really doesn't kick in until after the turn of the century. So we won't even get to that section. Okay, so that is the end of Manifest Destiny. I will get the Manifest Destiny test posted, and we're getting out of here 10 minutes early. Sunday? Oh, wait, before y'all leave, pass this around. Sorry. The flag assignment, turn it in on Friday. You can either email it to me or print it off and bring it to class on Friday. The Oregon Trail, I think I made it due today, didn't I? I can't remember when I set the time due for that. And it's not an assignment, it's extra credit. So even if you have it by Friday, that's fine. But yeah, the actual assignment is Friday. So either bring it to class or email it to me. I can't figure out how to turn in assignments through Blackboard, so you'll have to deal with my lack of technical skill here. Good grief.